He who does not set boundaries becomes a prisoner of others. He who upholds them with firmness turns respect into his own invisible crown. Have you ever experienced the moment when disrespect came not as a blow or a shout, but as a whisper, a malicious word, a friendly joke, a seemingly banal glance that nevertheless concealed a hidden malice? It is precisely in this seemingly harmless detail that the invisible war begins that decides who is respected and who is eternally underestimated. Most people don't realize it. They laugh, look away, pretend it doesn't matter. But the truth is that every time you ignore someone, you are teaching the world a silent lesson. You are teaching it that you accept being belittled. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He knew that there is no neutrality in the game of respect. Either you demand it or you lose. The first law that follows from this reasoning is brutally simple. Never ignore the first test. Every small gesture of disrespect is a trial balloon. The person launching it is just testing the waters. They want to know if they can make it. If you laugh at a hurtful joke, let an interruption slide, or accept a delay without a second thought, you've just passed the test. And the answer was yes. Yes, you can stand in my way. Yes, you can treat me like a minor. Yes, my word isn't worth as much as yours. The cruelest thing is that this almost always happens silently, without you even realizing it, but the other person notices. They record it, they repeat it, they magnify it, until what at first seemed like a trifle becomes a habit, and that habit becomes a prison. How many times have you faced a scene like this over and over again in bed at night, wondering what you should have said? How many times have you carried the bitter taste of cowardice not for lack of strength, but because you believed it was better to be mature? That's the poison of the first test. It seems harmless, but it robs you of something that should never be at risk: your dignity. If you let it go, you don't avoid conflict. You feed the beast that will bite even harder the next time. From this observation arises the second law: make silence a weapon, not an escape route. Cowardly silence destroys, but strategic silence builds. Imagine this situation. Someone interrupts you in front of others. You don't try to speak. You don't justify yourself. You don't insist. You simply remain silent, staring at the person, letting the emptiness weigh on you. This silence is not an absence, but a presence. It makes the other person feel that the conversation has stalled, that the group has perceived the lack of respect and is not responsible for the discomfort. Voluntary silence is worth more than any response. It is the invisible sword that cuts without raising your voice. But beware, silence without attitude becomes submission. This is where the third law comes into play. Respect yourself before demanding respect. The world perceives your self-image. If you don't value yourself, if you accept being the laughingstock of the group, if you stay in the background and expect recognition, you send a clear message. They can use me. I can handle it. It's no use demanding outward respect if you treat yourself like a leftover inside. Machiavelli knew that people are more influenced by the appearance of strength than by its essence. If your presence doesn't convey value, no one will value you. Respect begins in the mirror before it impacts the world. And if you stop to think about it, how many times have you been the one who opened the door to disrespect? How many times have you laughed at yourself just to make others laugh too, thinking it would bring people together? How many times have you withheld your opinion to avoid discomfort? How many times have you put the needs of others above your own just to be accepted? Each of those decisions wasn't just kindness. It was a lesson. And the world quickly learned, you don't respect yourself. The result is predictable. If you don't respect yourself, no one will. This is the beginning of the journey of the 18 Machiavellian laws, which must never be violated. They arise not from empty theories of universal goodness, but from the harsh reality of human relationships. The reality that everyone is constantly testing each other. The reality that every gesture counts as a status negotiation. The reality that those who don't respond teach the world to treat them as nothing. These first three laws aren't options. They're foundations. They are the invisible pillars that support the entire edifice of your reputation. Think about this. What would happen if, starting today, you stopped ignoring the evidence? What would happen if every silence was a conscious decision, not an act of fear? What would happen if you treated yourself like someone who never compromises their own dignity before demanding respect from others? Imagine the impact. Imagine how differently your colleagues, friends, family, and even strangers would treat you, the game would change immediately. Because the game always starts with the first move. But make no mistake, this is just the beginning. These 3 laws are the foundation of your strength. They open the door to something greater. Understanding that disrespect is always a test, learning to use silence as a weapon, and cultivating inner respect are just the foundation. The question remains, when the world increases the pressure, when the attacks become more sophisticated and the traps more subtle, are you ready for the next level? Deep down, you already know the answer. If you persist in old patterns, you'll be sucked back in. But if you decide to apply these laws daily, you'll discover something few experience: the feeling of being among people and feeling that no one dares to treat you as inferior. That is the true beginning of authority. Not in shouting or in excesses, but in control. What follows is even deeper. The outcome of the hidden power game in which every social gesture is a chess piece, and only those who see the entire playing field win. The power game is never explained. It happens silently through gestures, glances, and small decisions that seem insignificant, but which determine entire hierarchies. Many people make the mistake of believing that respect is based solely on character or good intentions. That's an illusion. Respect is based on perception. It's not just who you are that matters, but how you're perceived. The world doesn't see your essence. It sees the signals you emit, and every detail is interpreted as strength or weakness. That's why Machiavelli said that men judge more by their eyes than by their touch. What they see in you determines how they treat you. Think of something simple, like a work meeting. You arrive on time, prepared, and with solid arguments. But just as you begin to speak, someone interrupts you. Everyone looks at each other, not at you. You wait, continue, and then someone interrupts again. The group registers this. The interrupter dominates, the interrupted dominates. The curious thing is that the content of your speech may be more important, but that doesn't matter. Perception is stronger than reality, and it is precisely in this detail where the second level of the Machiavellian law resides. This scenario gives rise to the 4th law, turning every interaction into a game of chess. Most people react impulsively, as if playing checkers. They respond immediately, justify themselves quickly, and give in without realizing it. However, every gesture is a move on the board. When someone interrupts you, you have 2 options: react hastily, thus confirming your defeat, or freeze, stare blankly, and wait until the intruder feels uncomfortable again. This waiting is comparable to that of a chess player who repels the first piece's charge and delivers checkmate a few moves earlier. In the short term, it looks like passivity. In the long term, it's dominance. Now imagine a dinner with friends. Someone makes a joke about you, everyone laughs, and you smile so as not to be annoying. That ends the scene, right? False. Everyone knows by heart that you could be a target. The 5th law clarifies the reason. Never give too many explanations. If you try to justify yourself or laugh to soften the aggression, you give the impression that you need others' approval. Long explanations are never convincing. They only reveal weakness. Those who are truly worthwhile don't apologize for their existence. Don't try to justify every step, or try to clear up misunderstandings with words. They rely on facts. A story that illustrates this comes from an everyday context. A woman who was always teased by her colleagues for her accent always explained where she came from, why she spoke that way, and made fun of herself. Until one day, she decided to stop justifying herself. When the joke came up, she simply looked up, remained silent, and went back to her work. Shame filled the room. No one knew what to do. That was the last time anyone would laugh at her accent. The lack of explanation was more powerful than 1,000 justifications. Perhaps the most exciting law in this section is the 6th. Be predictable in your courage, but unpredictable in your response. People need to know that you have solid courage, that your presence signifies something solid and stable. This builds trust and respect. However, when it comes to how you respond to disrespect, you must be unpredictable. Sometimes it may be silence, sometimes absence, sometimes a direct reaction. The enemy must never know the cost of an attack against you. This uncertainty breeds fear, and fear is the basis of respect. Now think about everyday situations. Do you always react the same way? Do you always laugh to hide it? Do you always keep silent to avoid anger? Do you always try to be patient? This predictability invites abuse. People quickly recognize patterns and learn to exploit them. Have you noticed that it's always the same people who make fun of you, the same people who interrupt you, the same people who arrive late through no fault of their own? They repeat themselves because they know you will too. Breaking the pattern creates an aura of danger. If they don't know what to expect, they prefer not to take risks. But why is it so difficult? Because from a young age, we've been taught to seek approval. We've been taught to explain, smile, forgive, and be understanding. But this childhood survival strategy becomes a trap in adulthood. The world isn't fair to those who try too hard to please others. The world tests us, and those who don't set boundaries from a young age become a platform for others. A clear example of this is found in family relationships. An adult son always swallows his father's criticism to avoid arguments. The father has learned that he can say whatever he wants because he never gets a reaction. Until one day, instead of responding or running away, the son simply gets up from the table and leaves without a word. The silence and absence weigh more than any argument. The unpredictability of the reaction breaks the pattern of years. At the next meeting, the father reconsiders his words. Respect begins to develop, not because there has been a direct confrontation, but because the routine of submission has been interrupted. How often do you find yourself trapped in patterns of behavior that encourage others to treat you as inferior? How often do you unwittingly give away your power by simply reacting the same way over and over again? These 3 laws: turn every interaction into a chess game, don't over-explain, and be predictable in value but unpredictable in response, function like invisible weapons. They don't require physical strength, money, or status. They only require awareness and discipline. The discipline to recognize that the game is constantly evolving, the discipline to suppress the urge to explain, the discipline to vary the response and keep the mystery alive. And the more you apply them, the more clearly you see the hidden patterns in the world. You observe how everyone tries to position themselves, how each group creates invisible hierarchies, how every word carries more weight than the obvious. The mystery lies not in the big secrets, but in the details. Who speaks first? Who decides to close the topic? Who stays calm when everyone else loses their composure? These details not only reflect respect, they create it. Have you ever wondered what your life would be like if you applied these laws to every interaction? If you never again justified yourself beyond what was strictly necessary? If you reacted unexpectedly to every test? If you treated every conversation like a game board, not a trivial matter? This is the turning point. When you realize you don't live in a world of innocent exchange, but in a field of invisible negotiations. When you understand that every gesture conveys value or betrays weakness. When you decide to stop being an inattentive gambler and become a strategist. And this is where the tension grows. Because if until now we've talked about perception and strategy, the next step involves something even deeper: consequences. It's not enough to play smart. You have to make a good impression. It's not enough to defend. You have to score goals. It's not enough to be respected. You have to make sure that disrespect comes at a high price. There's something few understand until it's too late. Appropriate responses rarely leave a lasting impression. An insult returned with another insult vanishes like the wind. A joke countered with another joke becomes another moment of joy. An interruption answered with an attempt at conversation dissolves into noise. What truly lingers in the memory of the one who attempted to disrespect is not the serenity of the response, but the unexpected severity of the consequence. Machiavelli understood this with brutal clarity. If you want to be respected, you must learn to be unforgettable. And unforgettableness only comes when the price is greater than the attack. The principle is simple but unpleasant. Every wound must leave lasting marks. These marks can be absence, prolonged silence, the withdrawal of your presence, or even a definitive change in the relationship. The aggressor must perceive that the gesture was not cheap, that they lost more than they gained, that the decision cost more than it was worth. When that happens, a new logic takes over. Touching you is opening a wound that isn't worth it. We learn more through pain than through reason, more through influence than through dialogue. This is what distinguishes those who constantly test themselves from those who remain untouched. But do you have the courage to apply this principle? How many times have you decided not to overreact, allowing the insult to continue? How many times have you convinced yourself that it's not worth the drama, and ultimately silently accepted that your dignity was being undermined? If you decide to respond to every attack in kind, you enter a predictable cycle. The other person learns to play along because the response will always be controlled, limited, and harmless. But if you decide to turn every test into a lesson and every provocation into blame, you change the game completely. This is where the seventh law comes into play. Make every transgression costly. This isn't about violence, it's about strategic pedagogy. If you're constantly interrupted, don't try to buy space. Interrupt yourself, stop talking, and disengage. Make it clear, without words, that your voice is not being used as background. If someone ridicules you in public, don't defend yourself in the heat of the moment. Simply walk away. Your absence will cause more discomfort than any reaction. The price will be paid in oppressive silence, embarrassed stares, and bitter regret. Is this approach cruel? Perhaps. But what's truly cruel is being used as a springboard for life. Cruel is spending nights remembering what you didn't say, while the person who humiliated you has long since forgotten and sleeps peacefully. Cruel is being taught over and over again not to react. The impact of a severe consequence is actually an act of mercy. It's swift, clear, and impossible to ignore. It's either that or the slow destruction of respect. And you? Are you willing to be considered tough or inflexible if it means you'll never be a laughingstock again? Are you willing to bear the burden of a cold response if it means you'll save yourself years of scorn? The eighth law follows this path. Use absence as punishment. Nothing is more damaging than the loss of energy. Most people believe that arguing, complaining, or fighting is a form of self-defense, but all of this only fuels the attacker. What really disarms them is realizing they no longer have access to you. If a friend betrays your trust, you don't have to confront them with long speeches. Simply stop sharing information. If a colleague laughs at you in meetings, don't try to convince them of their error. Simply stop paying attention, sharing space, and including them. Absence isn't revenge. It's a sign of courage. It says wordlessly, "I am exceptional, and you just lost." This type of reaction has a strange effect. At first, it causes confusion. The other person expects a reaction, not emptiness. Then, awkwardness sets in. The absence outweighs the argument. And finally, it provokes regret. When the other person realizes they've lost access to your time, energy, and space, they realize they underestimated the consequences of the insult. And most of the time, they don't try it again. Have you noticed that people only value what they lose? Have you noticed that when attention is removed, it suddenly becomes a treasure? The ninth law is based on this effect. Deconstruct the attacker by your example. This means breaking the script. Disrespect thrives on predictability. Someone attacks you expecting a nervous reaction, an immediate response, a defensive justification. But if you offer the opposite, calm, neutrality, indifference, the attacker sees themselves reflected in a mirror. The joke loses its appeal, the criticism its power, the provocation its audience. The attacker is diminished because you refuse to be a character in the theater. The scene is inconclusive if the victim is not present. This mechanism can be observed in everyday stories. A young manager, the youngest on the team and constantly the target of ironic comments, decided never to respond with explanations. He simply observed the others in silence and then returned to the topic. At first, the comments were repeated, but little by little, the lack of response disarmed the group. The laughter lost its force. What had once been mockery turned into embarrassment. His example broke with logic. Instead of responding in kind, he made the others feel the emptiness of their own words. And you, how many times will you further fuel the theater of disrespect with your own reaction? How long will you want to be a supporting actor in the spectacle of someone who exalts themselves by degrading you? These three laws, making every infraction costly, using absence as punishment, and deconstructing the aggressor by setting an example, break new ground. It's no longer about reacting or defending. It's about shaping behavior. It's about teaching through impact. It's about becoming so unpredictable that no one knows if you'll shut down, disappear, or pounce. This unpredictability breeds caution, and caution is the basis of respect. The most interesting thing is that these practices don't depend on external coercion. You don't have to be the richest, the most powerful, or the most influential. The only resource you need is emotional discipline. The discipline to endure silence without having to fill it. The discipline to withdraw when you want to argue. The discipline to resist the temptation to justify yourself. It's a difficult but rewarding exercise. Can you imagine what it would be like if everyone who tried to mock you felt the weight of your absence? Can you imagine if, every time your words were cut off, you let the emptiness expose the aggressor? Can you imagine if instead of responding appropriately, you exacted a high price that couldn't be ignored? The world around you would be different, because respect arises from the connection between action and consequence. If the action is costly, it won't be repeated. If the costs outweigh the benefits, the situation changes, and you become a reference point instead of a target. The greatest tension lies in the fact that few will have the courage to apply these laws. Many will continue to believe they are excessive and that conflict is best avoided. But those who dare to put them into practice will discover something exceptional, the feeling of progress, without anyone daring to question them. And here the story takes a new turn. It's not enough to respond to disrespect with violence. We must build an image that precedes it, an image so strong that it even obviates the need to act. This will be the next step on the path, transforming consequences into prestige, until respect becomes not just a reaction, but an aura. True respect isn't born only from individual actions, but from what you project even before you open your mouth. The entire world reacts first to your image, your gestures, your silence, your gaze, and only then to your words. This is why many intelligent and capable men go unnoticed, while others, even without much substance, are treated as untouchable. There is an invisible force that precedes speech, and this force must be developed if you no longer want to be treated with disrespect. Presence is always more powerful than words. You can spend your life learning and acquiring skills, but if your presence doesn't convey authority, the world won't give you what you deserve. The creation of this aura isn't accidental. It's the result of repeated decisions, behavioral patterns, and the way you manage your own self-worth. Consider, for example, how historical leaders shaped their image. Napoleon, despite his small stature, was never ridiculed for it during his lifetime, as his manner of presenting himself exceeded his size. He entered every room as if it belonged to him. His posture was upright, his gaze firm, his silence never felt awkward, but imposing. This construction wasn't accidental, it was intentional. He knew that respect begins with what others perceive, not with what one declares. This is the secret Machiavelli so subtly described. Appearances are stronger than substance. It's not about living behind a facade, but about understanding that people react to what they see before analyzing reality. Modern psychology confirms this with fascinating data. Studies show that people who maintain firm eye contact are perceived as more trustworthy and competent, even without having spoken a single word. Other studies show that those who speak slowly are perceived as wiser and more authoritative, even when they say simple things. Impression precedes content. This is science, not just philosophy. And how are you perceived when you enter a room? Does your presence make others tone down their behavior or make fun of you more? What others perceive even before you speak is already an indication of how they will treat you. Incredible stories support this principle. There are accounts of diplomats who managed to avoid wars not with brilliant arguments, but with their behavior in crucial meetings. The little-known Cold War episode, an ambassador remained silent for nearly 5 minutes in the face of an aggressive provocation. This awkward silence, maintained with a calm demeanor and a steady gaze, was interpreted as a sign that a higher power supported him, even when that wasn't the case. The result was that the meeting ended without escalating the conflict. He won without speaking, only with his aura. This leads us to a conclusion. When your image conveys strength, you don't have to constantly fight. Attacks decrease because the perception of risk increases. No one dares to challenge someone who seems unshakable. Life becomes easier, not because disrespect disappears from the world, but because you begin to avoid it. That's why the fourth phase of this journey is the most transformative. As you build your aura, you no longer have to earn respect day after day. You expect it. But how do you build this presence in practice? One secret lies in selectivity. The more inaccessible you are, the more valuable you become. Those who overextend themselves are always available, and distribute their attention as if it were free quickly lose value. It's the same logic of the market. What is abundant loses value. What is scarce is protected. When you control who has access to your time and energy, you send a silent message that they are valuable. Others learn to measure their words, keep to schedules, and repress abuse because they know your attention cannot be bought. Another key point is to treat your time and energy like gold. Those who waste their time in pointless arguments, sacrifice time in toxic environments, and spend hours justifying themselves to those who don't deserve it, demonstrate their low value. However, those who refuse to waste energy on trivial matters and carefully choose where they invest their time will build a solid reputation. Soon, people will no longer perceive you as ordinary, but as someone special. Have you ever wondered how many hours of your life you've dedicated to people who didn't even deserve 5 minutes? Have you considered how many times you've walked away exhausted after a pointless conversation, while those who truly needed your energy were left empty-handed? The third key is secrecy. Total transparency doesn't generate respect, but rather vulnerability. Those who reveal everything about themselves, explain every decision, and divulge every detail of their lives lose the power of mystery. Secrecy arouses curiosity and, with it, caution. No one dares attack someone they don't fully understand. That's why those who talk less, reveal little, and leave questions unanswered appear stronger, not because they are truly invincible, but because no one knows their weaknesses. The accounts of former generals confirm this. Many of them consciously cultivated an image of unpredictability. They didn't reveal their plans even to their closest allies. This opacity confused enemies and allies alike and generated respect and fear simultaneously. The unknown is always more dangerous than the known. If we apply this to everyday life, the logic is the same. If no one knows how far you'll go, how much you can endure, or what you're secretly thinking, you become an unknown, someone no one wants to risk deciphering. What would happen if you put this secret into practice? If you talked less about your goals, if you stopped making excuses, if you resisted the temptation to open your life to everyone, what difference would it make in the way others treat you? Building this aura requires discipline, but also patience. It doesn't happen overnight. It's like sculpting a statue. Every small gesture adds a layer. Every decision reinforces the overall impression. Over time, this image becomes so solid that it precedes you. Your reputation precedes you. Those who have never met you have already heard about you. At this point, respect ceases to be a reaction and becomes a norm. An interesting neuroscience fact explains why this works. The human brain is hardwired to conserve energy. Instead of evaluating each person from scratch, it creates shortcuts based on their reputation. If someone is known for their consistency and steadfastness, others won't test their limits because the brain already associates their image with danger. This means that by building a strong image, you reduce the number of tests you face. This is biology, not just social strategy. Imagine walking into a new environment where no one knows you. Yet with just a few words and gestures, you set the tone. Everyone lowers their volume, thinks carefully about their words, and observes before making a joke. That's the power of an aura. It eliminates the need to constantly prove your worth. But are you willing to give up the need to please in exchange for the need for respect? Are you willing to sacrifice naive transparency to gain the power of mystery? Are you willing to say no more often than you'd like, just to prove that your time is valuable? The most fascinating thing is that this aura doesn't depend on perfection. You don't have to be flawless, just firm. Respect isn't born from the absence of mistakes, but from intolerance of disrespect. You can stumble, make mistakes, change your mind, but you should never allow others to mistake your humanity for weakness. The secret is not to compromise on the essentials: dignity, time, energy, space. There's another surprising aspect. People with this aura naturally attract better opportunities. Managers trust them, their partners seek them out, their friends respect them, not because they're smarter, but because they seem more trustworthy. The world prefers to invest in those who demonstrate strength, even if they do so discreetly. This creates a virtuous cycle. The more respect you convey, the more respect you receive, and the more you receive, the more you strengthen your image. And you, will you continue to wait for respect to be granted to you for invisible merits? Or will you begin to build the presence that makes it inevitable? Will you settle for being tolerated? Or will you choose to be remembered? This is the turning point that marks this part of the journey. Until now, we've learned not to ignore evidence, to use silence, and to draw conclusions. Now you understand that reacting isn't enough. You have to radiate. Your presence must speak louder than your voice. Your image must carry more weight than your arguments. It's this invisible weight that transforms an ordinary person into an untouchable one. And once that aura is established, the next challenge becomes even greater: maintaining consistency. Because there's no point in building a solid image if it's destroyed in moments of weakness. What follows is the discipline that separates those who are temporarily respected from those who maintain respect until the end. What separates the respected from the merely tolerated is not a grand display of force, but daily consistency. Respect isn't earned in isolated moments, but through the repetition of small actions that make it clear that no exceptions are made. When someone tests you and you respond decisively once, it leaves a mark. However, if you ignore a similar insult the following week, the previous impact is restored. Social memory works like this. What you repeat shapes others' image of you. Consistency is the ultimate test because it requires discipline, not in a single heroic act, but every day. The biggest mistake is believing that a harsh reaction is enough to forge a good reputation. People forget quickly. They test again, even unconsciously, to see if what they saw was the rule or simply the exception. Those who don't react the second or third time learn that their own limits aren't rigid, but situational. This is the poison of inconsistency. Every exception undermines the walls built with so much effort. It's like building a stone fortress and suddenly tearing down the blocks from within. Soon, everything collapses. But why is it so difficult to be consistent? Because life is urgent. You have good days and bad days, moments of patience and moments of exhaustion, situations in which you don't want to waste energy arguing. However, the world doesn't measure your mood, but your behavior. For those observing, your every reaction is a rule. If you let disrespect slide because you're exhausted, you're not sending a message like "I was tired," but rather, "I tolerated it." An observer doesn't read your inner self, only your gestures. And every gesture becomes an instruction for those who follow you. Have you ever considered how many times you've damaged your reputation by making exceptions? How many times have you said, "Just this once, I won't react," thereby setting a precedent that will test you again and again? Consistency deters those around you more than any single reaction. Think of the people you respect most. They are remembered not for a single gesture, but for their consistency. They know exactly how to react when someone oversteps their boundaries. There is no hesitation, no room for negotiation. This predictability generates inner calm in those around you and caution in those who consider it a test. That's why consistent leaders are both feared and valued. This isn't blind rigidity, but absolute clarity about what will never be tolerated. A curious story underscores this. In a large company, a director was known for always starting meetings on time, without waiting for anyone. Employees who arrived late saw that the discussion was already underway. There was no scolding, just total indifference. Within a few weeks, no one was late, not because they were afraid of lectures, but because they knew there would never be exceptions. This predictability completely changed the culture of an entire department, and look how simple it was. There was no yelling, just consistency. Do you realize how firm predictability breeds respect? Have you noticed that even animals understand it? A dog, for example, only learns rules if its owner always applies them the same way. If it's sometimes allowed on the couch and sometimes not, it'll never understand what's right. If it's always forbidden to do something, it learns quickly. Humans, who are even more complex, operate the same way when it comes to respect. The greatest tensions arise when one must demonstrate consistency in close relationships, in friendships, in the family, with one's partner. In these cases, discipline weighs more heavily because the temptation to make exceptions is enormous. However, it is precisely in this close circle that one's image is most strongly forged. Those who tolerate disrespect at home are seen as weak externally. Those who tolerate abuse among friends will not be able to maintain respect at work. Character is indivisible. Either the same standard is maintained everywhere, or it isn't. And you, how willing are you to maintain your boundaries with your loved ones, even knowing that doing so could cause them a shock? Are you willing to watch people leave because they don't accept your new rules? That's the price of perseverance. It reveals who truly respects you and who has simply taken advantage of your flexibility. Many will complain, say you've changed, and try to get you to back down. But every time you stand firm, you clean up your circle. Little by little, those who stay will be those who understand and appreciate your perseverance. And this is precisely the key point. Consistency not only protects you from disrespect, but also changes the quality of the people around you. You no longer attract those who want to exploit you, but those who naturally respect you. It's an invisible but relentless filter. And when you look back, you realize you haven't lost anything. You've simply freed yourself from burdens that should never have existed. A psychological fact reinforces this. Studies show that people who maintain clear standards in their relationships are considered more trustworthy. Although they may seem strict at first, over time they build stronger and more lasting bonds. This is because the human brain prefers to deal with rigid rules rather than instability. What generates the most stress is not demand, but uncertainty. Those who tolerate today and explode tomorrow are unbearable. Those who never tolerate create clarity. And you, would you rather be seen as docile and unstable or firm and reliable? Would you rather be tolerated with contempt or respected with seriousness? The secret is to be consistent, even in the smallest details. In major confrontations, it's easy to stand your ground, but respect develops in the smallest moments. The sidelong glance, the disdainful tone of voice, the slight interruption. If you respond consistently to these details, it becomes clear that there is no way out. Thus, tests are avoided before they even occur. Disrespect is nipped in the bud. Imagine what would happen if people knew exactly how far they could go with you in every aspect of your life. Imagine never again being blindsided by hidden attacks, because everyone already knows there's no place for them. Imagine how your confidence, calmness, and energy would change. This is where the story reaches its most exciting point, because maintaining consistency is not only difficult, but transformative. You stop being a merely reactive person and become a role model. Your attitude triggers a domino effect. Peers adjust their behavior, friends self-evaluate, family members weigh their words. Even strangers recognize within seconds that they shouldn't cross your boundaries. You become the one who sets the tone, not the one who is shaped by it. And this posture has an even more powerful effect. People don't remember what you say, but what you stand for. Your consistency becomes your reputation becomes your aura, and this aura precedes you. Those who have never met you already know that you are someone worthy of respect. This is the pinnacle of the Machiavellian transformation. Are you ready to carry this aura? Are you ready to be silently observed, to have every gesture considered, and to be remembered for your unwavering steadfastness? The answer has to be yes, because then you'll stop begging for respect and start receiving it without asking for it. Then you'll stop being a target and become a reference. Then the situation will definitely change in your favor. And one last step completes the journey, using disrespect not as a threat, but as information. Turning every hostile gesture into a card, every provocation into a revelation, every piece of evidence into strategic data. The final step isn't just about protecting yourself, but about looking beyond, mastering the invisible board, and anticipating the enemy even before they make their first move. This will be the ultimate conclusion, where respect is not only earned, but perpetuated. Reaching the end of this journey doesn't mean closing a gap, but rather opening the door to a transformation that can change your life forever. At every stage, you faced an uncomfortable truth. Disrespect is not the exception, but the rule. It manifests itself in whispers, glances, and hidden gestures, and you've learned that it's not enough to be good. Expect recognition, or believe that life will reward your patience. Respect must be demanded, maintained, and protected. This is the essence of the Machiavellian laws we've followed. Now, to close, it's time to put all the pieces of the puzzle together and show yourself the clear path to never again accept being treated as inferior. The first necessary consideration is that respect is not a gift from the world. It arises from how you face each test. Therefore, the first practical measure is simple but challenging. Don't ignore any sign of disrespect, no matter how small. Someone interrupts you, don't hide it behind a nervous laugh. Stop and observe. If they playfully mock you, don't end the scene or become an accomplice. If someone recklessly hesitates, don't normalize it. Every time you choose a calculated response, you are teaching the world not to do it again. This doesn't require aggression, but mindfulness. The key is in the details, not just the grand confrontations. Another important lesson is to use silence and absence as weapons, not escape routes. Silence born of cowardice destroys, but strategic silence inspires respect. The absence of those who abuse your time is more powerful than any argument. Withdrawing your energy from those who waste it is the most powerful message you can send. Presence is a precious gift, and the world must learn that it cannot be accessed indefinitely. You must not exhaust yourself trying to prove your worth to those who insist on belittling you. You must simply withdraw and let the emptiness speak for itself. Absence creates more impact than 1,000 arguments. The third point is, respect begins with yourself. If you don't treat yourself as a priority, if you constantly belittle yourself in the pursuit of recognition, if you sacrifice the essentials to please others, no one will value you. This means paying attention to what you say to yourself, how you occupy your space, how you manage your time. It means not apologizing for your existence, not justifying decisions to those who have no right to demand them, not subordinating yourself to fit into groups that don't recognize you. The world watches how you treat yourself and reacts. If you don't respect yourself, no one will. They've also learned that every consequence must be meaningful. Responding appropriately is like being forgotten. It's not about logic, but about building impact. So, if you're disrespected, it exacts a bigger price than the aggressor expected. It doesn't have to be shouting or violence. The unexpected shock is enough. The prolonged silence that creates discomfort, the sudden withdrawal of attention, the calculated coldness that replaces the impulsive reaction. The goal isn't revenge, but memory. The other person must think twice before repeating the act, because they'll remember exactly the price they paid. Respect grows from this tough pedagogy, but none of this can be maintained without consistency. The wall of respect is built brick by brick, but a single exception can tear it down. The greatest challenge is not to open breaches, not to contradict yourself, and not to get lost in the days of weakness. Because the world doesn't interpret your tiredness but your gestures. Even a single slip teaches you that there are times when you can be treated disrespectfully. The discipline of remaining firm in every detail transforms poise into respect, and respect is the most powerful weapon of all, because it precedes you. When you reach this level, something amazing happens. Disrespect diminishes, not because the world has changed, but because people now know it's not worth testing you. Your presence becomes an aura. Before they open their mouths, they weigh their words. Before they joke, they consider the cost. Before they try to break through, they think about the ultimate consequences. This is the silent victory, the victory that doesn't require daily effort because it's already built. And at the same time, it's a victory that requires care, because one failure and everything falls apart. Now, perhaps the most important revelation of all, disrespect isn't just a threat, it provides information. Every hostile gesture reveals something about those around you. Those who laugh at your successes show envy. Those who interrupt you reveal contempt. Those who praise you in public but mock you in private reveal manipulation. By reading these clues, you'll discover who's really on your side and who's just pretending. This reading is like a map. It lets you decide who to trust, who to avoid, and who to watch more closely. Transforming disrespect into intelligence is the final step toward never being caught off guard again. And you? Are you ready to embrace this new version of yourself? Are you ready to let go of the old habits of laughing to avoid conflict, giving in to be accepted, and giving explanations to those who don't deserve them? Are you ready to endure the initial loneliness that invades you when you start setting boundaries? Because it will come. Some will isolate themselves. Some will complain. Some will call you cold. But soon you will realize that you have lost nothing. You have simply eliminated from your life those who should never have been there. And in their place will come new people. People who naturally respect you, who understand the value of your time, whom you don't have to belittle to feel better about yourself. The practical path begins today, not tomorrow. Choose a boundary you've always crossed and decide never to let it happen again. Just one. If someone tests you, stand by your decision, even if it hurts. Then transfer it to others. Over time, this pattern will become part of your personality. It will no longer cost you effort. It will become your identity. You will no longer have to remember the laws because you will be their embodiment. Ultimately, this transformation isn't just about how others treat you, but how you see yourself. When you truly respect yourself, you discover an untapped power. You discover you don't need external validation to feel whole. You discover you can act with confidence because you know you'll never betray yourself again. That's the greatest victory. You no longer have to fight for respect, because respect is already part of you. If this content has awakened something in you, Don't let it fade away. Mark this moment as the beginning of a new life. Like this video to show that it moved you. Leave a comment, even anonymously, because your voice matters and can inspire others who also live in silence. And subscribe to the channel, because this journey doesn't end here. There is still much to discover, and each step forward will be a new weapon in your hands to live with dignity, strength, and presence. Respect starts now. It starts with you, and the world must learn that it will never again have the right to treat you as inferior.